The S-Class is Mercedes' biggest, most expensive, and most luxurious sedan, and the S550 is the least expensive version of this particular vehicle. Least expensive is, of course, a relative term, and the model we're taking a look at right here, MSRP is for $137,000. The last generation S-Class looked a little bit dowdy on the outside, and the interior wasn't quite as good as some of the competitors in this particular segment, but that's all changed for the 2015 model year. You'll notice that we still have a hood ornament up front, and our particular model has the optional radar sensor right here behind this area of the front grille. It's been a while since the S-Class was available in different lengths in the United States, but that is different for this model year. The base model comes at 206.5 inches long, which means this is a little bit shorter than a Maserati Quattroporte, and very similar in overall length to the long wheelbase competitors from Europe. Keeping in mind that is still a very long car, and we have an awful lot of room in the back seat area right back here, there is a longer version, and that would be the S600 Maybach. That's because Mercedes has decided to kill the Maybach brand as a standalone brand, and they're integrating it into the S-Class line. Out back, we get a design that is unmistakably Mercedes-Benz S-Class, but I think a little bit more attractive than the previous generation. I still think that the very square Mercedes-Benz S-Classes of yesteryear were my favorite overall design, but this is definitely better than the last generation. One thing to note is that, like Mercedes-Benz S-Classes of before, the tail lamp modules are still one-piece tail lamp modules, and they don't wrap onto the trunk lid. That means that when you do open the trunk lid, the opening is going to be a little bit smaller than you'll find in some of the competition. That's just the distance between this side of the opening and this side of the opening right over here. Also, a good thing to note is that along with that, trunk space is a little bit limited. I have a 26-inch roller bag here and a 24-inch roller bag. I could fit about 2 more of those bags in the trunk. That's because this S-Class has the optional reclining rear seats, and anytime you have a rear seat that reclines that far, the seat has to go somewhere, and that seat does move back into what would normally be the cargo area. As with previous generation S-Classes, we have an Airmatic Air Ride suspension in this particular model, but there is also an option for the Magic Body Control system. That system actually scans the road imperfections ahead of you and then programs the suspension to deal with the pothole before the suspension actually encounters the pothole. It is an interesting option, but it's a fairly expensive one, and our particular model does not have it. Now, before we go too much further, it's important to talk about how the S-Class slots in with the rest of the competition, because this is sort of a tweener vehicle. This slots between the LS, the 7 Series, and the Audi A8, and the next size category up, which would be the baby Bentley. The model we're taking a look at right here, which is still a S550, we haven't changed the engine yet, comes in at $137,000. If you add all the options up, you will end up at $230,000, which is far beyond anything you can do in a Kia K900, an Equus, a Jaguar XJ, and even most versions of the A8 or 7 Series. You just can't get any of those competitors up to the same kind of dollar heights that you can in the S-Class. They also don't have the same kind of options you can get in the S-Class necessarily either. Of course, this segment is not necessarily about value. This is about luxury, and that's really the key to understanding why this is so much more expensive than a Kia K900. In terms of more direct comparisons, Maserati's Quattroporte starts at $106,900. It probably is a more reasonable competitor to the base S-Class. Porsche's Panamera bridges the gap between those other entries and the top end, ranging from $78,000 to $263,000. In case you're wondering, the Aston Martin Rapide starts at $203,000, the Bentley Flying Spur starts just over $200,000, and the least expensive Rolls-Royce at this moment is $294,000. Any luxury car worth its salt needs a line of terrifically insane engines, and Mercedes-Benz has us fully covered here. The base engine is a 4.7-liter twin-turbo V8, producing 449 horsepower and 516 pound-feet of torque. In an interesting twist, you can opt for the plug-in hybrid model for exactly the same price. That is a 3-liter turbocharged V6 engine with a hybrid plug-in system. The V6 engine produces 329 horsepower and 354 pound-feet of torque by itself, and the electric motor produces 114 and 251, but you don't add those directly up one-to-one. If that is not insane enough for you, then Mercedes-Benz does have 2 different turbocharged V12 engines. There's a 6-liter turbocharged V12 that produces 523 horsepower and 612 pound-feet of torque. Then we get another one that produces 621 horsepower and 738 pound-feet of torque. Now, keeping in mind that our model has the optional Designo leather interior, you can see what's going on inside. We have an incredible attention to detail and fit and finish in this cabin. From these million-way adjustable passenger and driver seats, you can see we have a 4-way adjustable headrest there, adjustable thigh cushion, we have adjustable bolsters, the dynamic bolster technology that Mercedes-Benz has had for a while. these absolutely beautiful laser cut speaker grills on the front and rear doors. Our model has the optional up-level sound system you can see right there. And we also have 3-position seat memories for all 4 seating positions in our model. We have some very interestingly done air vents right there. That is an electronic control knob, not a mechanical one. And then we have this leather treatment to the dashboard that looks very much like quilting. It is actually just a hole punch pattern in that leather, but it is very attractive. And then everything that you're seeing here is leather. So we have a leather upper dashboard with that piping right in there, and then we have that leather airbag cover. You can see the detail going right there with that contrasting piping in the middle. In fact, the only non-leather portion to this interior appears to be the inside of the storage compartment in the front and rear doors. Instead of a single portrait-style display like we get in the Model S, we get these 2 incredibly large LCDs on the dashboard, one for the infotainment and navigation system, and the other one for your LCD instrument cluster. Now you'll notice something interesting here. You can actually see the backlighting right here behind the screen, and that is color changeable right here inside the command user interface. This has all been redone for this model, and it does look an awful lot better than before. It's an awful lot snappier. We have those fancy graphics going on there, and as we've seen before in other German models, you can adjust practically everything in the car. Right here we have our ambient light color, and we have a color palette selection, so you can actually see that color changing right there behind the screen. Personally, I prefer this sort of neutral daylight color right there. That light does light up all around this display, and in fact there are nearly 300 LEDs devoted to the interior lighting in the S-Class. Notice we have some physical buttons right here in the bridge between the 2 screens. That's to lower and raise the rear headrests, the rear shade, and a traditional dimmer knob right there. From the position of the driver, you can see we get an all-new steering wheel with a leather airbag cover right there. It is a 3-spoke design now with this flat bottom. Ours has the optional wood trim. You can see that forward-looking camera system right there in between those 2 dials. That's really the only 2 looks you get, is that particular look and the look with that system in the middle. You can't change colors like you can in Cadillac's Q. You see we get all sorts of buttons going on over here on the driver's door. If we scoot back to the center of the car, you can see that we get 4 of those same air vents we saw on the passenger side. Again, this is an electronic volume control right there. The controls for our dual zone climate control system. We have some storage cubbies right under here. This is where you'll find the optical disc player and SD card slot. And if we flip that up, we actually have 2 very large cup holders right in there. Moving back from that, this is where you'll find the controls for the command system. I do have an iPhone 6 plugged in. You can see that we get a lot of very metallic looking controls right there. These control the air suspension system, and then these are direct access buttons to various features in command. We have a touch controller right here, as well as the traditional knob controller. Out on your favorite winding mountain road, the S-Class is an awful lot more fun than you might think for a vehicle that's designed to be driven in as well as to be driven. 0 to 60 happens in an incredibly quick 4.6 seconds, which is faster than Mercedes-Benz tells us that this should do. You can thank the all-wheel drive system for that, because there is absolutely no traction problem going on in this car like you find in the rear-wheel drive entries in this segment. This is the base twin-turbo V8 in this vehicle, and it has an incredible amount of torque, especially once the turbos start getting going. Now, there is still a little bit of turbo lag, but it's pretty unnoticeable. The only time you're really going to notice that is when the start-stop system has stopped the engine, you're at a stoplight, and then you want to floor it, and the car takes off. Then it's going to take you maybe 5 seconds to go from 0 to 60, which is still an incredibly quick time. Braking times are a little bit longer than the rest of the competition thanks to the curb weight of the S-Class, which is notably higher than something like a Jaguar XJR, although Mercedes-Benz does try and compensate for that a little bit with grippy tires, wide tires, and cross-drilled rotors in the model that we're in. Stopping distances were still about 10 to 15 feet longer than any of the other competitors, however. When it comes to handling, the XJ is probably the best entry in this segment because it is so light. It's right about the same curb weight as a Mercedes-Benz E-Class or actually a Jaguar XF. It's very, very light with that aluminum body. The BMW 7 Series and the Lexus LS are a hair below that in most versions. Of course, you can get the Lexus LS with an air ride suspension. It's going to be a little bit softer, a little bit less connected to the driver. And then there comes this Mercedes-Benz S-Class. I don't think that's a bad thing because this actually is an excellent balance between a car to be chauffeur-driven in and a car to drive yourself. The Audi A8L is a very nicely done car, but because of the way the driveline is designed and the way that that engine hangs out in front of the front axle, it definitely feels less connected out on the road. This car has a very solid feel. You can really tell exactly where the front end is going. The front end doesn't feel light, I would say, but it does feel very, very accurate, and it doesn't feel heavy at all. And you can get a very front-heavy feel in that Audi, especially at higher speeds. This cabin is as whisper quiet as you would expect, although you can get a little bit of engine noise if you want to use these transmission shift paddles on the back of the steering wheel. This Mercedes-Benz 7-speed transmission does not shift quite as fast as a ZF automatic, but it is an awfully fun partner. One of the things that I like about the S-Class is that you can tell the transmission to be in sport mode while you have the suspension in comfort mode, or vice versa. You can put the transmission in eco mode and then the suspension system in sport mode. They're not tied together like they are in many vehicles. It allows you a little bit more customization. Part of the mystique and part of the reason for buying an S-Class is this difficulty in comparison, because the S-Class sits alone in its particular category, being the most expensive entry in that full-size luxury category, but not quite the next step up into that Bentley or the Rolls-Royce. I think that's an excellent place for Mercedes-Benz to be. While the last generation S-Class didn't feel as special as I would have liked for the price tag, this Mercedes definitely feels as special as you would expect it to be for $130,000 or $140,000. Thanks for taking the time to check out this video. Again, I'm Alex Dykes of thetruthaboutcars.com. Go ahead and click that button at the bottom of your screen so you can subscribe to all of our videos. Find us over at facebook.com, over at twitter.com, over at thetruthaboutcars.com, and I'll see you next week.